All right, folks, as promised, today we're going to tackle the material scaffolding, and it's going to look something like this. And I had to make a decision about where I was going to put the navigational items on the Android version of this application. And on iOS, it was very easy. They go down at the bottom. That's where iOS navigation has been pretty much since the first iPhone. Android has switched up. Android used to always be on the top and strongly discouraged anybody from putting navigational items on the bottom because of the interference with these buttons. With the onset of two-handed devices, that has become not only not taboo, but a lot of people are starting to do it. The YouTube app has all the navigation items at the bottom, and that's a Google product. I chose to put them up here because, for one, I still like the way it looks. I really just like the way the navigation is up here. From there down to here is just white space and totally free for you to use. I think it makes a nice separation. I also like with the tabs on Flutter that it's a scrollable item. So people can come up here and they can hit the tabs. But they're pretty soon going to figure out, because if they drag it all side to side, they can see the screen start to shift, that they can navigate just by swiping left and right. And I think that's a nice feature to have. Also, Facebook is still using this pattern where their tabs are at the top, and so you have at least, one major app that Android users are used to seeing navigation at the top. This does something very similar to Facebook, which is it will disappear it'll collapse the bar, and you can just be left with these items here. So if you have a list of items, you go to scroll up, most of the app bar disappears, and you've got a ton of space here to work with, which is great. And as soon as you scroll down, this comes back and you can go back to the next screen. But you don't need it as long as you're perusing the list. It disappears and leaves you with just a lot of real estate to work with. So that's why I went with the top navigation here. And that is a little simpler to accomplish in Flutter. There is a scaffold around it, so you end up with a scaffold on the outside, you end up with a Sliver app bar, you end up with a Sliver body. The tab bar view has an array of scaffolds or classes that it will switch through this area, slide through as you either select the tab or swipe left and right. So a little simpler to set up, and we'll do that now. All right, so booting up the app and logging in, we get this vendor page button, and then that takes us to our scaffold, which we just had a placeholder, and it looks like I put the center around the scaffold rather than the text, so it looks really horrible. So let's just fix that. So if we go to screens and vendor, that's where I am right now. We have our Cupertino page scaffold all set up there. Let's just wipe this out, leaving the return. And what we want to do is wrap this all with a default tab controller. So we'll start with a default tab controller. And we'll give it a child, and that child will be the scaffold. So there's a wrap of a default tab controller around the whole thing. And then inside the scaffold, our body is going to be the nested scroll view. So a little different than the structure we have up here with Cupertino, where we have the scaffold on the outside, then the nested scroll view, and then we have more layers inside there. The actual tab part in material starts on the outside, then the scaffold, and then we can go right into the nested scroll view to contain our slivers. That nested scroll view has a header sliver builder, and it works just like above, so we need to give it a build context, and a Boolean inner box is scrolled, and then we open up curly braces, and this is just like above. I suppose I could have copied it. We have an array of widgets like that. Let me get a couple of semicolons in here. And so we'll use our app nav bar, and we will call the material nav bar, which we don't have yet. So we've called the Cupertino nav bar from our custom widget, and so it's time to revisit that. So if we go to widgets and we go to nav bar, we have just the Cupertino Sliver nav bar, and so we need to build a Sliver app bar, which is the material equivalent. So we can do static Sliver, and we'll call it material nav bar. I'm going to give it some name parameters, which I'm going to make required. So string title and a tab bar, which we'll call tab bar. Open up some curly braces. I need to bring in the material package, which I can do like that. And so returning a Sliver app bar. So that's the Sliver equivalent of the Cupertino Sliver navigation bar. The title is going to be text title. The background color, we want to make it the dark blue, so we'll use app colors. I guess we don't have that imported yet, so app colors, dark blue. And on the bottom of the app bar is where we want to put our tabs. So that is where we will put our tab bar. All right, I want to do a couple more settings on there, but let's leave that for now, come back. So let's go to vendor. And where we left this hanging in the nested scroll view, we can put our material nav bar. And we can fill in the title, which will be vendor name as a placeholder. And then we need a tab bar. And so we did an equivalent to that in widgets and widgets vendor scaffold. So we did a Cupertino tab bar here. I'm actually going to do the tab bar in this one in the vendor file. And the reason being is that in material, you have to specify the number of tabs here on the tab controller. In fact, let me do that now. That's why it's had a warning there. And so the tab controller very much linked to the tab bar. And so I would just prefer to have them right here together so that if I end up changing this 3, then I've got my tab bar right there. And if you prefer to extract it out into the vendor scaffold widget, feel free to do that. It doesn't take up a whole lot of space. So I'm going to do tab bar. I'll do a static tab bar with a getter. And that will return a tab bar. And so, yeah, we want to do tab array. And those are tab items. It's got an icon, so these are material icons. So we'll do icons.list for product. And then we're just doing more here. You can do labels on these. They don't look great, so I'm just going to do icons. So we'll do shopping cart, and then we'll also do person. Kind of match what we have on the iOS device. All right. And then I can take that tab bar and pass it to vendor tab bar. All right, so that gives the nested scroll view an app bar, and so it still needs a body. And so the body is going to be a tab bar view. And so this is going to be a children of widgets, and this is the array that the icon will link up to, the tab bar will link up to, and that this length will be looking for. And so rather than the Cupertino approach where you give an index and you've got a function that says, all right, what's the index, and okay, present this, we're going to give it an array, and the tab bar and the default tab controller are going to work it all out. So products will be the first one, orders, and then profile. I'm going to import all of those. Let's do a restart. Okay. All right, that's most of it. Now it is scrolling up like this, and that's not exactly what we want. I want it to scroll and to stop there. So let's revisit the nav bar, and there are some additional options here, and they are very well documented. Here on the Sliver app bar page of flutter.dev. In fact, you've got a video on Sliver app bar, you've got an example, and then down here you've got animation examples, and I imagine they'll probably have a code pen here shortly where you can play with it. But there are these options at the bottom that are floating, pinned, and snap, and they give you a nice animation for each one, what it does. And I want this one, true, 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 which will do that. It'll expand when we scroll down, and it will contract when we scroll up, but then it will pin itself to the top of the screen, and not like some of these other ones, the whole thing doesn't go up off the screen with it and have to come back. So I like this option, floating equals, where was it? True, pinned equals true, and snap equals true. So floating true, pinned true, and snap is true. So the snap is just an animation. So that should be, yep, so that works. Snap's just an animation that very subtly snaps it into place. I have a hard time telling the difference between snap, true, and false. Pinned makes sure that part of the bar stays here and doesn't go all the way up. And then floating, you can't really tell here, but if there was a full list, then if we had floating set to false, it wouldn't come down until we had reached the top of the list. And if you have floating set to true, then as soon as you pull down, you're going to get the rest of the app bar. So those are the differences there. Now, stylistically, I would like to play a little bit with the colors up here, get rid of this default blue. I don't know if I want white versus gray. That's not very obvious which one is highlighted. So I'm going to go back to screens and vendor. And I've got some options here in the tab bar that would allow me to change that. I've got unselected label colors, so that's going to be, well, of course, the ones that aren't selected. For that, I'm going to use the light gray color, but I don't want to put these in here because we're going to be creating a few more scaffolds. So I'm going to actually put the colors in the global styles class that we created, or the base styles anyway. And so let me pick my properties out. I want to label I want to change the color of the label, which will be actually the icon. And then I also want to change the color of the indicator, which is the line underneath here. So let's go to styles, let's go to base. Actually, changing my mind, I'm going to create a new file in styles called tabbar.dart, and I'm going to make that an abstract class, which will be tabbar styles. And I'm going to create a static color So I'll need to bring in material for unselected label color. And we'll just get app colors.light gray. There we go. Let's bring in material. And I'll just copy that and paste it twice. So we'll do selected label, or just label color actually. Lowercase l, and then we'll do indicator color. And so the label color will be straw, and then the indicator color will be straw as well. All right, so then we can just go out to vendor and we can fill these in with tab bar styles. Let's see, I skipped one, so we'll go to label there. Up here, we'll do tab bar styles, unselected label color, and then here is, of course, tab bar styles, indicator color. And this should actually be indicator color. All right, so when I save that, we get a lighter gray color. That's good. And then, so when we do click on it, we get the straw on the indicator. So all of that looks good. Maybe one last nitpick here is that the vendor name is not consistent with our title. So let's change that to our title font. And we can do that by visiting widgets and navbar. And here in our material navbar sliver app title, we can give the text a style. And so we can bring in text styles dot. Let's see, the nav title, I think we ended up doing that dark blue on the Cupertino. Title, I think, is still dark blue. So we probably want to create a second one for nav title material. And that won't exist yet, but we can then go to styles text and let's copy nav title. And create a nav title material. And instead of dark blue, let's just do white. Do plain old colors.white, because that seems to look fine there with our dark blue background. And yeah, there we go. So that gives us our Poppins font. We'll let material figure out the size of it, so we won't specify that. And I'm happy with that. So that's the material scaffold. In the next one, I want to come back and I want to actually revisit the login sign up and put some error catches there, and also give us the ability to log out from the Cupertino and material scaffolds now that we have that, because it's really starting to bother me that I can't actually log out of the account. So we'll do that next time. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you then.